This video was brought to you by Brilliant, and the first 200 people to use the link below will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Depending on whether you believe the polling and reports out of Russia, there's one thing that's clear about the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the ensuing war. It's a war not done in the name of the Russian people, but a war spearheaded by the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. While the Russian military and state apparatus were initially happy to go along with Putin's plans, as sanctions mount and Russian forces continue to take heavy losses, support for the war internally is probably waning. In fact, just last week, Ukrainian military intelligence claimed that Russia's political and business elites are formulating a plan to remove Putin from power as soon as possible. Now, all of this has to be taken with a massive pinch of salt. The report is yet to be verified, and, well, it's in Ukraine's self-interest to claim that Putin is vulnerable. And for what it's worth, most analysts think that Putin's downfall is very unlikely. Nonetheless, we thought it would be interesting to do a video on how this could, at least hypothetically, happen, who could end up replacing him, and whether this change could actually lead to the war in Ukraine ending. Before we begin, currently only about a quarter of you subscribe to the channel, so never miss a thing during this difficult and important time by subscribing and joining the TLDR gang. Let's start with the common means of toppling Putin. As is the case with almost all presidential regimes, Putin, as Russia's president, was elected for a fixed term. Formally speaking, the presidency has a separate origin and separate arrival to the rest of Russia's political regime, but that's not to say that Putin's term couldn't be ended sooner. Under the Russian constitution, the president of the Russian Federation shall cease to exercise his powers short of the term in case of his resignation, inability because of health reasons, or in the case of impeachment. Now, there's no indication at all that Putin's about to resign of his own accord. So how about health or impeachment? Well, on the health front, there has been some speculation among some more hopeful Western commentators, but ultimately there's no factual evidence supporting the idea that Putin is physically ill. On the impeachment front, Russia's constitution is incredibly strict as to what is and is not grounds for impeachment. Under Article 93 of Russia's constitution, the president may be impeached only on the basis of charges of treason or another grave crime. And that has to be advanced by the State Duma and then confirmed by the conclusion of the Supreme Court and by the conclusion of the Constitution Court. Again, this isn't looking promising. A, it doesn't look like Putin's actually committed high treason or some other form of grave crime in the Russian domestic context, and B, an impeachment process would be unlikely to get approval from the Duma and both courts, which are both packed with Putin loyalists, which ultimately leads us with the less conventional means of Putin's removal, starting with outright assassination, be it through poisoning or otherwise. It's pretty safe to say, though, that security around Putin is tight. According to Telegraph, Putin rarely travels anymore, and when he does so in heavily armoured vehicles, accompanied by vans full of heavily armed Federal Prosecution Service officers, and an electronic warfare vehicle to jam any bomb detonators along his route and divert any drones. Again, according to Telegraph, Putin even has his own personal food taster. But given that Kremlin security protocol isn't easily accessible to download online, we haven't been able to independently verify any of this, but it does sound pretty plausible. In any case, the chances of Putin being assassinated are pretty much zero. Another potential alternative is a broader coup, orchestrated by the army or security services. Yet, regardless of who orchestrates it, it's unlikely to get far before word gets back to the Kremlin and subsequently Putin. The military divisions physically closest to Moscow are carefully watched by the FSB and would have to defeat the National Guard first, a parallel international security army with its own tanks, artillery, and anti-tank missiles. Putin's also made sure that there's no coherent opposition in Russia, which means that finding a group that could actually organize a coup would be difficult. You get the point then. Putin probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon. But in the unlikely hypothetical in which Putin is toppled, who can replace him? Well, to be brutally honest, this isn't clear either. Under the terms of the Russian constitution, if the president becomes incapable of fulfilling his duties, they shall be temporarily fulfilled by the chairman of the government of the Russian Federation, i.e. Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin. However, Mishustin only took office in January 2020, just before the pandemic properly hit, and his presidency so far has been overshadowed by the pandemic. So he hasn't had time to form a network of power that would support him as president, which just complicates his hypothetical tenure. In any case, the Constitution specifically stresses that the acting president shall have no right to dissolve the State Duma, appoint a referendum, or provisions of the Constitution. This essentially means that Mishustin would be an interim president, with no real power until or unless he was re-elected, something that just doesn't seem likely given Mishustin's lack of popular appeal. However, let's go back to the statement from the Ukrainian military intelligence, where they claimed that Russia's elite were positioning the current director of the FSB, Alexander Bortnikov, as the successor to Putin. Bortnikov is a longtime ally of Putin, being seen by many as part of Putin's inner sanctum. A coup being led by Bortnikov would therefore be unlikely. But crucially, if Bortnikov was indeed in on it, it could be successful, especially if Bortnikov ordered the FSB to turn a blind eye to dissent in the military divisions closest to Moscow. Nonetheless, despite what Ukrainian intelligence might say, Bortnikov seems like an unlikely candidate. He's close to Putin, and, well, toppling Putin is just a ridiculously high-risk move. Alternative figures include Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and former President Dmitry Medvedev. Shoigu currently looks unlikely, not least because as Defense Minister, his job is to oversee the special military operation invasion of Ukraine, which just isn't going particularly well at the moment. Shoigu is also one of the only people that Putin has vested power in with no historical links to the FSB, which also doesn't bode well for him. When it comes to Medvedev, the former Prime Minister and Putin are pretty close. In 2008, Putin hit his consecutive term limit as president, so Medvedev took over as president and Putin became Prime Minister, which let Putin continue as de facto leader of Russia. Medvedev then agreed for Putin to stand as president in the 2012 election. The point we're making here is that Medvedev has so far been quite loyal to Putin, garnering him the title of Putin's seat warmer. So, is he a real contender to topple Putin? Well, he does have the experience of the presidency already, but we do have to consider that he was probably just given that job by Putin precisely because Putin doesn't consider him to be a threat. Additionally, he was far more liberal than Putin, something that the Russian elites likely don't look favourably upon. So while on the surface Medvedev might be an obvious candidate, in reality this couldn't be further from the truth. So if that's our options exhausted, let's look outside of Putin's inner sanctum, where we'll find the only other person with a real chance of launching a bid for the presidency, Alexei Navalny. But unfortunately for him, Putin jailed him, and he's currently in prison. Crucially though, even if we could find another candidate, would getting rid of Putin actually end the war in Ukraine? Well, in all honesty, it's not clear. While the invasion has unquestionably been spearheaded and given momentum by Putin, there's definitely also some grassroots support. Recent polling found that 76% of Russians supported the invasion, and while that polling should be taken with a pinch of salt, it does still look like a 50% majority of Russians do support the war. A complete U-turn then could, at least at the moment, be politically disastrous. The parents, spouses, and children who have lost loved ones will rightfully highlight how their sacrifice has been in vain. A favourable solution to Russia then, out of this war, would likely still be necessary. Exactly what this solution entails is, well, anyone's guess. All in all then, Putin's toppling looks very unlikely. And even if it did happen, it wouldn't necessarily mean the end of the war. This video was brought to you by Brilliant. Brilliant is an online STEM learning platform that turns complex subjects into fun and interactive experiences. I actually did a computer science degree, and I've loved exploring Brilliant to refresh my skills, as well as learning new ones to help with my current job, like their superb statistics courses. But you don't need any kind of background in STEM. If you just want to spend a bit of time building your skills, then you can do it right away with no long boring lectures like the ones I had to sit through. Sorry to my former university. Instead, you can learn through interactive games and puzzles, the kind of thing you actually want to do. There's something at all levels too, with more advanced courses on things like neural networks and even quantum computing. Just pick a course that you're interested in and get started. They're all designed by award-winning instructors and built upon the principle of active learning. So you're gaining STEM knowledge by actually doing it. Brilliant helps you learn new things and sharpen your skills. So if you want to improve with STEM, then you should sign up to Brilliant at brilliant.org/TLDREU. And the first 200 people to do so will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks so much for supporting the channel.